Okay, right. I think we'll make a start then, and then if anybody else joins, they can jump in as and when they're ready. If you haven't introduced yourself yet and you want to, then please feel free to do so. The session, let me just put my camera on. There we go. So the session is being recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel later on today. So if there's anything you want to reflect back on, or if there's any anything that you want to check up on, then that'll be available for you later on. So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk you through the partnership, really, let you know a little bit about what we do. And then later on, we're going to be joined by my colleague, Alicia. Alicia looks after our health programs, and she's going to give a little bit of a presentation around a project called We Can that she's recently got up and running. What I thought it would be quite nice to do is to start with a video. We normally do our inductions face-to-face and you get the chance to meet the rest of the team, but seeing as we're not doing that today, this is our video. Hopefully the sound is going to work. This is a video that we prepared for Thank You Day. So it shows all the members of the team. And if you don't know, Thank You Day was back in the summer, and it was an opportunity for everybody across the country, really, just to give their thanks to the sector for what's been happening over the last 18 months.
We know that the last 15 months has been a very difficult time for everyone, particularly those involved in the sport and physical activity sector.
Across Hertfordshire, we know many organisations have done a huge amount to support your local community.
So we at the Heart Sports Partnership just want to say a heartfelt and big thank you to everyone.
Thank you to all our partners across the county, including...
Thank you to Referral Cycling Club and their committed volunteers to delivering community activity and the development of a new Marlborough cycling hub.
I'd like to say a really big thank you to Elaine Connolly and the rest of the volunteers at the Irish Network Stevenage for all of the support they've given their members over the last 15 months through phone calls and visits and keeping everyone really supported.
Thank you to Letchworth Rugby Club for all the community work they do, such as going into the local schools and delivering rugby. Also thank you for opening their doors for other community projects, including our very own Fit, Fed and Read project.
Today I would like to say thank you to everyone in Hertfordshire who completed the mental health awareness for sport and physical activity e-learning.
So I'd like to say thank you to Watford SC Community Sport and Education Trust for their overnight Ramadan tournament that brought together all the communities in Watford for a very special evening.
I'd like to thank Kate Day and Greenfields Primary School for hosting Fit for Read for the first time last summer and improving the lives of the young people and children in the area.
I want to thank the Seal School in Hertford for going above and beyond and supporting physical activity in the local area, especially with projects like Fit, Fed and Read and Heart's Big Hit.
I'd like to thank Lucy Kennedy from LK Fitness for keeping all the people in Broxbourne fit, healthy and motivated in the last 15 months. Thank you, Lucy.
Today I'd like to thank Steve and all the coaches and volunteers at Brookside Boxing Club in Bournemouth. You guys have worked so hard to increase boxing provision for the local Cowley Hill community. Thank you.
A big thank you to Ashley from For Young People for the work you've done throughout Run Hatfield over the past 15 months.
I'd like to thank Hearts Baseball Club in Hemel. They've been putting on lots of free open days for children, and they've also been working really hard to try and get a localised county league going. Thank you.
I'd like to thank my wonderful colleagues at the Heart Sports Partnership for their unstinting work and enthusiasm over the lockdown period, and in particular for their support of each other during that time.
A massive thank you to all the teachers and school staff in Hertfordshire for your dedication, determination and passion in keeping all the young people physically active during the pandemic.
Thank you to our fantastic partners that have helped contribute to the Live Longer Better in Hertfordshire revolution, encouraging happier, healthier, older residents across the county.
The 4th of July is Thank You Day. We're encouraging all of our partners and community clubs to get involved and thank their community.
There you go. So that is our team. Let's get back to the presentation. That's our team. We're still in that kind of working from home stage. Some of us are in the office, some of us are working from home, but hopefully over the coming weeks and months you'll get to know some more of us in the various work that you're doing. So Heart Sports Partnership, what are we? We were established in 2003 and we're one of the 43 partnerships that are across the network. Going back a few years ago, we were known as County Sports Partnerships, and then there was a change in the name just to reflect the direction that the work that we do goes in and to sort of reflect the fact it's not always sport based. So we are essentially the same thing. Our core funding comes in from Sport England and our local authorities. So Hertfordshire is a 10 district county, and each of those districts contributes a certain amount of money per year into the partnership that enables us to continue doing our work. And as such, the local authorities and specifically the sports development officers and the health officers are some of the closest links that we've got. We work with an enormous range of stakeholders, partners and organisations, and that is just growing. As you see through the presentation, the kind of work that we're doing and the sort of projects we're involved in, it means that we're working with some really kind of unusual and more sort of less traditional partners than we would have worked with maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We are, and we always have been, a high performing active partnership, and that is reflected in lots of ways, whether it's national promoter scores or whether it's being compared against other sort of counties of the same size. Everything that we do, we are, you know, pretty high performing at what we do. And we're based at the University of Hertfordshire. So if you're not aware, the uni in Hatfield has got 2 campuses. We're on the de Havilland campus, which is where the sports village is, and our offices are just upstairs on the corridor there. So you can always pop in and say hello. Everything that we talk a lot about, the power of sport and physical activity, and over the last 15 months, 16 months, a lot of the work that we're doing has kind of circumnavigated around each of these individual criteria. So we have a really, really strong focus on health and wellbeing. Social inclusion kind of runs through the core of what we do. It's very much about trying to engage the whole community, the whole county, to get involved in events and projects that we run. Crime and disorder reduction is a lovely outcome of a lot of the work that we do. I'll mention a bit later about things like Hearts Big Hit, the work that we do with Sporting Chance. Those projects are specifically tailored to try to help alleviate some of the crime and disorder problems that exist around the county. COVID recovery, again, there'll be a reflection of this when we talk about sports clubs later, but everything we do, as with I'm sure a lot of the work that you're involved in, is very much about getting people back on their feet, whether that's as individuals, as sports clubs, as volunteers, trying to just recover out of the whole of the pandemic situation. The community cohesion that we try to elicit through the work that we do is a really strong element of some of our active local work and trying to bring communities together to work better for themselves. The inclusivity element, again, runs through everything we do. We've got a really strong disability arm in the Hearts Disability Sport Foundation, and that's headed up by a lady called Ros Cramp. You may have come across Ros in your previous work. Regeneration and economic prosperity. We've worked quite a lot with Sport England and other national grant pots to try to help not only people get back on their feet, but to try to bring money back into the sector. Again, as you guys will know, lots of money's been lost over the last year or so. So it's about trying to kind of bring that back to the fore and make it, make it a sustainable sector to be in. And then, of course, educational attainment. We do a lot of work around schools, and Tanya, that you saw in that video, is our education lead. The likes of Sam, you may have met Tanya already through your school games organiser work, and the work that we do around schools brings in things like Active Lives, the Daily Mile, the school games, primary premium, all sorts of work to support teachers and CPD and schools in their work going forward. So just to give you a bit of an overview of Hertfordshire, we have, even though we're a 10 district county, we've got 12 school sports partnerships. So some of those bigger districts are sort of divided up. We're a 3-tier local authority, which means we've got 1 county council, those 10 districts that I mentioned, and then around about 120 town and parish councils. The 2 universities, so that's actually talking about the Royal Veterinary College as well. So you've got the University of Hertfordshire and then the Royal Vets College. The further education colleges are North Herts, Oaklands, Hertford Regional and West Herts College. And then we have a number of school facility operators. That number's probably grown since this last presentation. The majority of schools are now becoming more au fait with letting their facilities out through community asset agreements and community use agreements and that sort of thing. And I think some of the work that we're doing is helping to just drive that forward. When we talk about the Happy Holiday Activity Fund later on, we've used that opportunity to mobilise a lot of schools to try to just become a little bit more community focused, and also through things like opening schools facilities funding, just trying to get schools used to opening their doors to their communities. We work with the community and voluntary sector, and that can be through charities, through groups, through our CVSs. The name of that sector's changed recently, so it now brings in social enterprise and faith, and it just means that we are broadening the partnerships that we're going out to. Everything that we do is very, very much focused around volunteers. We have just gone into the interview stage of our second year of an ambassador programme, working alongside the university. So we'll be having 6 students, second and third year students from the uni, that will be supporting 6 different elements of the business, very much project based, but they will be volunteering their hours, partly as part of their course, but partly because it's a really tangible work experience for them while they're at their university. We've got 10 active local networks, so each active local network looks slightly different, but this is our place-based approach. This is us going into the most deprived ward of each district and trying to use the assets that exist, whether they are people, whether they're facilities, whether they're partnerships and networks, just to try to strengthen the area through sport and activity. We've got a number of professional sports clubs in the county, so we've got Stevenage FC, Mavericks for netball, Saracens, although they train just out on the periphery, a lot of their delivery work is still within the county, and Watford FC as well. So we're really fortunate that a couple of those organisations have got community trusts attached to them, and it just means that that community ethos of the work that we do is spread quite evenly across Hertfordshire. We work with a whole manner of national governing bodies at various levels. Some have got county officers, some have got regional officers, but as much as possible, the colleague that is our Ngb lead tries to kind of stay in touch and make sure that whatever's happening nationally is replicated locally where it's needed. Sports clubs, 2,500, there's probably far more than that, and that can be anything from a bowls group in a community hall to some of those bigger professional sports clubs that we talked about. Public Health Hertfordshire, we've got very strong links with, as I mentioned earlier on, with health and wellbeing. We've got strong links with the health system. The clinical commissioning groups and the integrated care system, if you don't know, are kind of becoming one in the same now. So clinical commissioning groups were brought in a few years ago. We've got 2. There's one that covers East and North Herts, and there's one that covers the West, and that the role of those groups is gradually changing and is becoming the integrated care system. And this is much more about giving sort of certain areas of the county the opportunity to have more autonomy in how they deliver their health service. A step down from that is primary care networks, so you'll have clusters of GP surgeries who are working together more closely than they have before, to share resources and to share systems. Things like social prescribing, community link workers, community navigators, all of that stuff kind of falls into this integrated care system. There are in excess of 18, perhaps a couple more now, leisure operators, a number of coaching agencies, and of course the Heart Sports Partnership team. And when we talk about the partnership, we're not talking about the kind of 15 of us that are at the university. We're talking about all of these people, everything kind of intertwines and everything works alongside itself. And it's really important that is at the core of everything that we do, that we have those strong partnerships. A bit more of a landscape for Hertfordshire in terms of statistics. So some of the ones that really stand out is this thing about the number of children that are eligible for free school meals. So the population of the county is just under 1.2 million, and there's a huge proportion of children that are in receipt of free school meals, and that number climbs weekly by about 150. So as a parent, you make an application to county council if you feel that you need your children to be in receipt of that benefit. That partnership is then passed on to the school, but to be at 25,000, that number will be far superseded by now, especially given the financial difficulties of the last year. Statistics around obesity, knife crime is quite a startling one, and again that number could be vastly different by now, but that gives us the impetus to do some work in crime reduction, working with the likes of the Police Crime Commissioner and with Herts Constabulary. So where it's got the number of the refugee children, again that number's going to be different. We've got a lot of work going on at the moment with Afghan arrivals, and we're working with a coaching agency to try to do a little bit of sports delivery with them. Those families and those communities are understandably going through a really hard time at the moment. and it's important that we try to work with them to bring them a little bit of normality. So the coaching agency is using some tackling inequalities money that comes from Sport England to just go and do some football with them a couple of nights a week, try to give them a little bit of kind of downtime. There's so much upheaval and chaos going on in their lives that we want to be able to try and help and support if we can. The population of the county, we are generally quite an affluent county, very much white British dominant, but fairly high levels of inactivity still. I know that 22.9 and 13% don't seem huge, but that still represents around about a third of the county that are quite inactive, and this is something that we're always keeping an eye on and trying to tackle. So the work that we do is underpinned by strategy. Uniting the Movement is Sport England's national strategy. That might be something that you've come across recently or since its launch, and that is very much about COVID recovery and using digital platforms, as everybody's kind of become used to over the last year or so. So everything that we do is trying to kind of mirror the messages that they've got in their strategies. But similarly, we also consult with the likes of health and wellbeing strategies, serious violence from the government, as I mentioned earlier, police and crime commissioner strategies. Everything that's happening around us has to inform the sort of work that we're doing in order for us to be successful. Our own strategic plan is actually coming to an end, and we are in the middle of, we've had a consultation period. We're in the middle of writing the one that is going to go from 22 to 27. And again, that will be very much reflective of the kind of messages that are in the Sport England strategy, with a bigger focus still on COVID recovery. There'll be an element of active environments in there, active travel. So a little bit of a move away from the type of strategy we would have had 3 or 4 years ago, where we were looking at solely increasing participation and trying to get more people attending, increasing memberships, that sort of thing. The work that we do is diversifying quite drastically. And I think over the last few years, the primary role that any county sports partnership, active partnership now has changed. So if you were to look back, if you were around during the days of satellite clubs and Sportivate, it was very much around trying to get everybody active, trying to increase the number of bums on seats, delivering lots of programs. That shifted. So we're now not necessarily working with, you know, it's not shooting a cannon into the air and trying to land it everywhere. It's targeting those specific groups. And that's where the active local work comes in, where we're trying to find those niche areas and the people that need it most, and try and really represent those groups to make sure that their life opportunities are increased and that the inequality gap is constantly worked to be shortened. Participant outcomes. So this is the bums on seat statistic, which is now more about social outcomes. We want people to have greater self-confidence, self-efficacy, people to feel more prepared to go into the workplace through sport and activity. Our programme delivery has become more about strategic influence, which is why our partnerships are so important. You are stronger together. So if we can have seats at tables with the Director of Children's Services and the Director of Public Health, that puts us in a really strong position to be able to ensure that money that comes into the county is better spent. And we've done a really good job of that over the last year. And then again, similarly, we used to put a lot of our work through NGBs previously, but now it's very much about working in a specific place and with those certain customers to make sure that what the NGBs and partners want is targeted in the right areas. And an example of that might be when cricket, actually, cricket came to us and said we want to deliver some street cricket. We know we're interested in targeting communities in St Albans, Broxbourne and Stevenage. What is it we can do to make that work? So it's looking at what's specific for you guys and what's specific for us and trying to make the two come together. Our evaluation framework, we were fortunate enough about 4 years ago now to have an evaluation specialist work with us for a couple of years. And it became evident that so many organisations and projects put the thought process around evaluation right at the end without thinking about it at the beginning. So we put together a framework that was just there to help and guide projects and organisations through evaluation, and to try to encourage them to think about it from the beginning, not only from a financial perspective, but also to consider the measurements that you want at the end, and to make sure that you're taking those measurements at the beginning so that you can evidence the impact of your work. This is something that's available on our website. We've got a resources section that's got all manner of kind of fact sheets and data and insight, local, national, regional insight that's kind of worth a look. And what we try to do is encourage people to just consider using some of those resources if you're putting in maybe a grant application, or if you're thinking of planning a program, thinking about those measurements and the sort of information that you're going to want to get out at the end of it. We are in a really lucky position that we're at the university, so it's not unusual for us to include researchers in some of the work that we're doing. With the Happy project that I'll come on to, if that gets funded again next year, that will be the opportune time for us to speak to the university and say, right, are there researchers within health or within behavioural change or within nutrition that might want to come along and be part of that journey with us? So active local, I've mentioned this term a few times. I just want to explain the rationale behind it. So if you were to pick the 10 most deprived wards in Hertfordshire, you'd probably have 2 or 3 in Watford, a couple in Broxbourne, a couple in Stevenage, and there would definitely be some districts that had no representation. So when we first decided to pick up this asset-based community development or place-based approach to the work that we were doing, we went with the most deprived ward per district, and then there's somebody everywhere. So in Stevenage, it's Bedwell, in St Albans, it's Sopwell, in Welwyn Garden City, it's Pear Tree. So we've used the index of multiple deprivation to look at what those most deprived areas are. And then we've gone in and we've created partnerships with some really unusual partners. So up at Stevenage, that was the area that I looked after for a while. My relationships were built with the Irish network. As I mentioned in the video, there's a huge Irish population in Stevenage, and it's a very active population. They've got a high membership of attendances at tea dances and coffee mornings and bingo afternoons and that sort of thing. But in order for us to make an active local approach work, we had to have the opportunity to really get to know those communities and understand what makes them tick and what they need. Understandably, each of those areas looks different. So the community that you've got in Watford will be a very much more ethnically diverse community than what you've got perhaps in Letchworth on the Jackman's estate, because by its very nature, they're different areas. It's been a really interesting piece of work because it allows you to just speak to everyone. It's great if you're nosy, because you can just talk to anyone and everyone about what happens. You know, one day you've got a meeting with the imam from the mosque, the next day you're speaking to a chair-based exercise group, the next day you're out with a cycling group at a school, and it's a really interesting way of getting a granular understanding of what that community is like. We've been in there for probably about a year, so those partnerships are really strong. And one of the things that it's allowed us to do is identify the clubs, the sports clubs in those areas that were most in need of Sport England's return to play funding. And that's going to be a video that I'll show you in a couple of minutes. But I think it's just that there's lots of organisations that are taking this approach now, especially if they have a county-wide remit of looking at those areas that need help more than most. This gives you a bit of a better picture. So in terms of a map view, this is where we are situated. You've got the names of the areas on the right and then a rough idea of where they are on the map on the left. This isn't to say this is the only place that we invest any of our efforts, because it isn't. But what it does mean is that we drive a lot of our resource and our funding and our office to time into those areas, and we look for justification as and when we need to move out of them. So the whole ethos behind Active Local is that activities we put on needed to be accessible, affordable and appropriate. We need to include the local authority. As I said earlier on, they are such a strong partner for us that you can't do this kind of work. You can't go into a district unless you're going to include the local authority. It just doesn't work. Proportional universalism, I always trip over that. It's understanding the people that are most in need and making sure that everything's equal and that everybody's getting the same opportunities as everybody else. And then, as I mentioned earlier, understanding, a granular understanding, almost not necessarily street by street, but to the point where in a given space in Bedwell, I know the kind of residents that live there. I know how the school operates. I know who frequents the community centre. And that level of understanding you can't do on a district-wide basis. You have to be more granular with your approach. And then when we're going in there are 4 main things that we're trying to do. It's about connecting the community. It's about bringing those partnerships together to make sure that when you back away, eventually you're not just, you're not dumping in a bag of cash, fixing a problem for a short while and then stepping away. Money layered over the top is great, but alongside that, you need to make sure that you've got those connections and those networks fundamentally from the beginning. We want to be able to develop the community, and that could be through training, through volunteering, through trying to increase workforces, through just a knowledge base, to try to be innovative and give them ideas of new ways of working. So connecting the school up with the cycle hub, getting them to train up some new breeze riders, working with the recycling team so that the school can access second-hand bikes, all of those things that build a project. And then the sustainability, the local sport and physical activity networks that sit under each of the active local areas are very much about people that have got a vested interest, people that have got something to offer, people that can help strengthen that area. And the membership of those groups is vastly different across every district that you go to. So this is our film that reflects some of the recipients of return to play funding. We as officers, when the return to play fund was first announced, we were tasked with trying to get as much money into our districts as possible in those targeted areas to just try to help clubs as much as we could. So again, I'm hoping the sound with this plays, but this is it's fairly long. It's about 6 minutes, but it's a worthwhile watch.
Thanks to Sport England's return to play funding, many clubs across Hertfordshire were able to access much needed funds to support their return to activity. We worked in partnership with Richard Sutcliffe from Funding for Sport to ensure that all clubs were aware of the offer and also could access the funding application without any additional costs, which we knew might be a barrier to some clubs in Hertfordshire.
I'm Chris Samways and I'm the Club Development Officer at the Hert Sports Partnership. Over the past 18 months, we've seen that it's vital to be able to support clubs through funding applications to make sure they're able to support their members to return safely with the COVID situation. And with the support of return to play funding, we've been able to support clubs with much needed resources through funding applications. This has enabled clubs to access special equipment and extra resources to enable wider classes and more sessions to be run in COVID secure environments. Between the period of January and July of 2021, we were able to support over 60 organisations to bring in over £350,000 to support returning to play safely.
Hert Sports Partnership sent us a link to return to play, and I looked at it and I thought it was the answer to the club's dreams. We were facing a funding shortage because of limited numbers on the track and still having to pay the full hire costs when we got back on the track. So we had a deficit. We needed 18 months out, we'd had coaches retire, we needed new coaches, we needed to upskill some of the coaches we got. We got a huge waiting list, and because of restricted numbers on the track, we were only allowed to bring back bubbles in groups of 10 or so, and everything had to be cleaned between everybody's use.
Well, they were brilliant. They contacted us via email and a couple of texts, and they just helped us and advised us how to go about applying for it. To get the funding was fantastic. It enabled us to get outside, because we're quite lucky, we've got an AstroTurf attached to the club where we could take the children and the men and train. I think it's approximately about a month to 6 weeks before gyms were allowed to reopen.
The funding being accessed has meant so much for these clubs to return safely and provide confidence for those members returning to sport and physical activity.
I think I probably cried when we got it, just because I knew that suddenly we could have all our year 6s, all our year 7s, all our year 4s and 5s back, and because there were coaching courses back up and running in April, I could get Sam qualified.
I'm now here as a qualified coaching assistant due to the club being able to fund that for me. This means it opens up more sessions for the club, and it just allows them to open the doors to more children and adults to be able to come along to the Stevenage and North Herts Athletics Club.
So through this funding application we were able to cover more equipment. We were able to run an additional group, which we needed to do because of COVID regulations meant we had to reduce our group size, and we were able to provide these additional groups to support more young people throughout lockdown.
So 11 freestanding punch bags, 40 pairs of boxing gloves, that enabled us to train outside before the gyms were allowed to open, which made a massive impact on us. Really, really good.
We've got standing triple that's been brought in, we've got foam javelins, but we also needed equipment to help us warm them up properly so we could tackle their coring problems, plyometric problems. So the med balls for work over hurdles, work over SQA hurdles, running drills, shots, discus, howlers, because the kids love them.
One of those benefits which will affect every player is we're going to buy a brand new 740 Cornello table. That's going to cost us £1,000, but that's going to attract good players from other leagues. So it's all going to benefit Bedwell.
Some of the equipment we were able to purchase was a new boxing bag, gloves so that every child has their own gloves and we were able to quarantine the gloves appropriately, hand wraps, PPE, sticks, body shop bags, those kind of things. HSP and Richard were brilliant for us because without them we wouldn't have been aware of the grants that were available, and Richard saved us an enormous amount of time by writing the grant for us and being successful in achieving that grant.
I had one Zoom meeting with Richard which was sufficient for him to ask all the relevant questions and to guide me into providing him with our club's financial requirements. And after that, it was just an email dialogue, so very easy and painless and very successful.
Heart Sports Partnership, with the help from Richard Sutcliffe, has given us the opportunities to buy all this equipment, move the club forward in so many other ways because we didn't have to fundraise, we could concentrate on our core, which is inclusive athletics for all.
Immediate impact has been supporting these young people who have felt very isolated. Feedback that we've had from them was that grit was the only thing that they felt offered them support during these times. It offered them hope and ways to manage their feelings in a support group as well as being able to physically exercise when a lot of that was restricted.
This funding has meant we've been able to access key resources to prepare for COVID guidance and also allow for members to return, whether they're keen, cautious or new members, to come back through the doors of our fantastic clubs across Hertfordshire.
I love that video because it just, none of that is fabricated. That is our officers getting out on the ground, speaking to people. You know, one of the boxing club mentioned about emails and text messages. A lot of our officers are that close to our clubs that we've got that relationship, and that comes through a lot of hard work, a lot of conversation, a lot of commitment. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on, getting out and getting to know our areas as intimately as we can. We've got Alicia joining us in about 5 or 6 minutes. So I'm just going to go through a little bit more of the work that we do because there's a couple of bits I want to cover, but as well as give her enough time to talk about what she's doing. So when you look at the partnership as a whole, it's quite difficult to break it down and explain what it is we do, but this image does a pretty great job of it. So active local is the approach, but the work that sits behind it is kind of broken up into 4 quarters. So we've got sport for social change, physical activity for wellbeing, the core market, and then schools, and then down the side of that you've got our values and objectives and that sort of thing. I'm just going to move on though, because each of those quarters then gets broken down further. So under sport for social change, this is very much about those social outcomes we talked about. So Fit, Fed and Red is one of our projects. This is our original holiday hunger program. So Fit, Fed and Red is about kids that are eligible for free school meals coming along to 4 hours a day of activity during the holiday periods, where they get a hot meal and they've got access to sport and activity and some kind of enrichment and some literacy. So we work with Hertfordshire libraries on the red element of it, and then we introduce them to service such as the fire service and Herts Police and Mind for Mental Health, and it's a kind of quite a holistic based summer holiday program that we run summer and Easter as well. Hearts Big Hit is our boxing program, so we work alongside a charity called Box Clever. There are 10 Hearts Big Hit locations around the county, which is roughly one per district, but is pure coincidence because that existed long before Active Local. And again, that's a kind of a diversionary activity for children aged 7 to 15 to try to combine a bit of boxing and education for them. Sporting Chance and Doorstep Sport, again, this is about putting activity where it's needed. So Sporting Chance started life as a referral program. So we were taking referrals of young men and women into projects, and normally through sort of antisocial behaviour channels or through schools, and it was giving them a diversionary activity at a time when they would definitely be out doing things that they perhaps shouldn't have been doing. Career mode is career mode's a little bit dormant at the moment, but career mode is very much about volunteering and access to employment through volunteering and giving up your time. But it's got a very gamification based background to it. So you have, as a young person, I would have an agent. My agent gives me tasks to do in order to get points. The more points I get, that can then put me on a pathway for qualifications and CPD and helping at events and that sort of thing. Our Ngb Liaison I mentioned earlier on, This Girl Can, we touch on every year. We have This Girl Can in Hearts period, normally within June, but we've got some festivals happening later in the year this year as well. And then the community sport ambassadors that I mentioned earlier. Underneath that is a list of programs that we are proposing. That stuff hopefully will play out in the next year or so, but these are kind of just a bit of a brain dump of ideas of other things that we're looking at doing. Physical activity for wellbeing. So Active Together is a contract that we have with the County Council to deliver seated, chair-based and Otago classes. Disability sport is looked after very much by the Hearts Disability Sport Foundation and Roz's team. We have an ambassador for Park Run and Junior Park Run in Alex Barron. So she helps to establish new park runs, identify where they're needed, and then kind of at certain times of the year utilising race directors on certain days, increase the volunteering and that sort of thing. Mental health is increasingly becoming a more important part of our work. In the Thank You Day video, Alicia mentioned the number of mental health champions we had trained. So over the last couple of years, we've been the East of England mental health hub, which means that we've had a bit of a leading role in the East to try to get more mental health champions trained up, to run a couple of conferences and to just kind of raise the profile of embedding that element of work within projects that are being run. We Are Undefeatable is a national campaign that looks at promoting sport and activity through long-term living conditions. So similar to This Girl Can, there's been radio appearances, TV appearances, there's a whole catalogue of assets behind it that is about advocating being physically active alongside having a stroke or living with cancer or having a diabetic diagnosis and trying to remain active through that. And we support it mainly through our social media channels. And then again, just some proposed programs. Things like social prescribing, that's not necessarily a program of ours, but it's very much something that we're tapping into. And in the coming weeks, we will have our activity finder up and running. So the activity finder is in the process of being populated at the moment, but that will be a central place where the likes of GPs, social prescribers, community navigators can go to look at what activity opportunities exist within the county and under certain suitability filters for the person that they're working with. The core market, so this is essentially our sports clubs. The core market is serviced probably most thoroughly through Coach Education Week. For us, that's every half term. Chris, that was on the last video, is just putting together the programme for Coach Education Week at the moment, and it's moved from being very Ngb led and level 1s and level 2s to a lot more soft skills. That's not to say there aren't any Ngb qualifications in there, but the softer skills, you know, working with people that have got long-term conditions, understanding suicide awareness, working with mental health conditions, all of those things that are kind of useful for coaches to have in their toolkit is what a lot of our focus is on now. And then finally, our schools. So as I'd said, Tanya is our education lead, and our reach into schools is and needs to continue to become stronger. Schools are the route to market when it comes to children, and especially with the Holiday Activity Fund, being for such a large proportion of the school audience in those free school meal children, we want to constantly try to strengthen that, and we do it through our network of school games organisers. We've also got a head teacher advocate group, so that is a head teacher representing a school from each of the districts that kind of say we're not the best school, we're not the worst, but we are a school that wants to try to champion the work that you're doing with schools and to try to be a voice of schools within the local area. Sorry, I'm breezing through this so fast. So the Happy programme, I've got about 2 minutes before Alicia comes in. The Holiday Activity Fund, I'm going to flick onto the next slide because that will help. The Holiday Activity Fund is a national investment from the Department for Education. And for 2021, it was 220 million across the country and just under 3 million into the county. It is very much born off of the back of Marcus Rashford lobbying the government about holiday hunger and continuing free school meal provision over the holiday periods. And government decided to pick that up and turn it into a project opportunity. So every county in the country for this last year has had an investment, and that investment has to be used to provide free holiday activities for children during Easter, summer and Christmas. So for us, we work alongside Hertfordshire County Council as the grant recipient, and then Hertfordshire Community Foundation are the body who deal with the money. So as a provider, if you want to run a camp for kids to come to, you put your application in to Herts Community Foundation. Our role within that is the coordination of all of it. So we are coordinating the applications coming in, we're coordinating the booking system where parents find the activities and then book spaces for their children. We coordinate the marketing. And what's behind it is the fact that school holidays can be really difficult times for these families when they know that their children are going to get a decent hot meal during term time, and that's removed from them. In the holiday period, it becomes really difficult, but coupled with the fact that those families don't have the income for kids to experience holiday activities. They don't have the opportunity to go and do the same things as their peers do. They don't have access to nutritious food as easily as their peers do. They are more likely to be socially isolated. So the whole project is about running an activity camp for those kids to go to. Now, over the summer holidays, we had a great success. We had 77,000 places available through the summer. We had around about 42,000 bookings from children that were eligible to attend, and then that went down to about 25,000 attendances. So there are huge numbers, huge gaps in between those numbers, and that's something that we're constantly trying to improve. So the next round for us is Christmas. Our aim and what we've achieved is 20,000 places at activity camps over Christmas. I'm smiling because we're so glad that we managed to get to that point. And that is from 48 different providers that have put applications in. I know that for those of you that are on the call, Watford, you guys have definitely put in an application through Chloe. And there will be some others that have come from you guys that I'm not aware of. But what that means is there are 20,000 opportunities for kids to do something over the Christmas period when they might otherwise just be sitting indoors. Our next move is about marketing it and making sure that everybody has got the opportunity to attend and that they're aware of it. There are struggles in the communication of that message out to families, but that's something that we're using this time now to really try to hit home on. Right, Alicia has just come in, so I am going to bear with us for a minute. I'm going to close my presentation. Alicia, are you okay to share yours if I close mine?
Morning. Yeah, let me try. Oh, it says it's disabled.
That's okay. Right, let's see if we can get you sharing your screen. Okay, you are now the host, so it's your show now.
Okay, thank you. Just bear with me. Okay, can you let me know if you can see my screen now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it in presentation mode now?
Yeah, good.
Awesome, brilliant. Thank you. Right, so my name's Alicia Pollack. I'm a health project officer at Heart Sports Partnership. I'm also a level 4 cancer exercise rehabilitation specialist. And today I wanted to talk to you about our new service, Weekend Cancer Exercise Rehabilitation. So first of all, just to give you some background to why we're doing this program, looking at the data, we can see that the cancer cases, diagnoses are increasing. And you can see that between 2009 to 2017, it has significantly increased for both of our CCGs. And also that the 2-week wait referral is higher in the Eastern North Herts compared to Herts Valley CCG. So in 2016, there were 3,108 new cases diagnosed in Eastern North Hertfordshire. It's slightly different for Herts Valley CCG with 2,000 new cases in 2019-2020. And to give you a picture of what it looks like for Hertfordshire and our district, so Broxbourne and Stevenage are both higher than England's average in terms of new cancer incidences. Then it's followed by Hartsmere, Three Rivers and Watford are placed at the same place. Welling Hatfield, St Albans, then Eastern North Herts, North Herts and the Coram. So just to tell you a little bit more what life after cancer might look like for some people, the good news is most of us are now surviving cancer, which means there is more people who will need some support after they completed the treatment. And the cancer diagnosis can have a huge impact on someone's physical and psychological health. And most of those side effects are a result of the treatment that a patient will go through. So this includes things like surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, biological therapy or hormone therapy. So all of those can have a significant impact on somebody's quality of life. So the good news is that exercise is safe both during and after most types of cancer treatment, as it can reduce the consequences of the treatment itself. It reduces comorbidities. So if somebody is suffering from other illness as well, it can reduce the disease progression, decreases mortality, and also can decrease the reoccurrence of cancer. So some of the benefits of physical activity for people living with and beyond cancer. So we do know that exercise can help reduce anxiety. It can also help improve depression, definitely a big one for reducing fatigue. Can improve quality of life in general, prevent or improve lymphedema. So this is if someone has got experienced problem with the lymph nodes as a result of the treatment, and they might have some swelling around their arms or legs. Exercise can help with that. And in general, it can improve your physical functioning, whether it's your lung capacity or your muscle strength. So just to tell you a bit more about what motivates people affected by cancer to be more active. So research tells us that it's the recovering strength after treatment, improved quality of life, improved independence, expanding social circle, regaining control, and in general, feeling good about yourself. So that's why we wanted to bring a new service to Hertfordshire to benefit that particular group of people. So Weekend is an exercise referral program for Hertfordshire residents who've been diagnosed with cancer. It is a free 12-week course designed to improve your physical strength as well as your mental well-being through means of exercise and physical activity. And the session also aims to create friendship groups so participants find it easier to continue with the journey beyond the 12-week group course. So as part of the program, every client will be assessed at the point of referral. So when somebody sends a request to join the program, or if a healthcare professional refers somebody to the service, everyone will be assessed on a one-to-one basis to make sure that the program is appropriate to their needs. And there is also ongoing support from the cancer rehabilitation specialists over the duration of the program. And refreshments and social is a part of the class. So that's how we want to shape it, to make sure people can make new friends and make new relationships. There's a discounted membership offered with the leisure centre at which the participant will be attending, and gym induction is also offered to make sure they can sort of expand their exercise journey. So the program has criteria, so it's adults only, so participants must be over the age of 18. It's any cancer type, any treatment at any stage of their journey. They must have received the diagnosis in the last 3 years, be a Hertfordshire resident, and they must agree to take part in our evaluation process. So every participant is asked to take part in the evaluation. We collect their information at the baseline, so right as soon as they join the program, and then we also check on them 12 weeks after to see what sort of progression they made over that period of time. So at the moment, we've got 5 locations: Stevenage, the Healthy Hub, Borehamwood, the Venue, which is the local leisure centre, St Albans, YMCA Community Gym. In Watford, we work with Everyone Active, Central, South Oxley, Everyone Active, South Oxley. And this week, we just announced that we'll add 1 more session in Hatfield at Birchwood Leisure Centre. So referrals, I briefly touched on it previously, but specifically this program is open to anyone. Anyone can refer. We accept self-referrals, referrals from healthcare professionals such as nurses or oncologists, social prescribers, community navigators from across the county, as well as any other professional who have heard about the service and think will be appropriate for the client. So there are 3 ways to refer to the service. The easiest one is by phone. So we've got a dedicated telephone number just for this service. So anytime people can call and refer themselves and speak directly to myself if they've got any questions, queries, or whether they're ready to go ahead and sign up. By email as well. So we've got a dedicated inbox, weekend@hearts.ac.uk. And by post as well. It's going to be slightly slower, but I mean, it's still an option if somebody would prefer to refer by post. And our referral form is accessible on our website. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to take questions if there are any. And that's just my contact detail if anyone would like to reach out.
Brilliant. If you guys want to put your questions in the Q&A box, if you've got any for Alicia, that would be great. But yeah, thanks, Alicia. That's really interesting. It's something that's taken a little while to get going, and now we're finally there. It will be lovely to see more referrals coming in for it.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And actually, just following on from that, while people are just sort of thinking and deciding, that is the end of the induction. We're not going to keep you for any longer. So if there is anything that you want to ask about anything else to do with the presentation, then please feel free. Failing that, if there are any particular officers that you want to be in touch with, if you go to our homepage, on the menu, there's a little section that's about us, and it's got email addresses for each of the separate officers. So if there's anything that you want to make contact about, then please feel free to do so as and when you want to. Doesn't look like anyone's got anything to ask. So in that case, then you guys are free to go. This is recorded. We'll pop it up onto our YouTube channel, and we'll make it available for you to have a look at if there's anything you want to come back on. But thank you, and thanks, Alicia.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Bye.